Welcome to the Tambellini Group's Women in Technology Spotlight Series. In these brief interviews, we highlight the career paths, perspectives, and accomplishments of some of the remarkable women shaping technology strategy and the future direction of technology in higher education today. Today, we are lucky enough to be joined by Leah Kraus, the CIO at North Carolina Central University. Welcome, Leah.
Well, good morning. Welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited for the conversation.
We're excited to have you here. Let's start off at the beginning. So, when you think back to being very young, what were your career aspirations? What did you want to be when you grew up and why?
What a great question to start with. We don't often go backwards that far back. I grew up in a household where we valued education a lot. We valued volunteering, giving back a lot. I grew up having dinners around the table with my brother and my parents where we would dive into pretty intense conversations. My parents always thought that asking questions and answering questions, there were no wrong questions. So I think my passion for education started very early on. I don't know that, I will tell you a silly, funny story.
Love those.
I grew up when there was like American Bandstand and Soul Train, and we used to pretend that we were on American Bandstand on Saturdays at noon. And so there was a small time that I wanted to do that, and a small time that I wanted to be one of the dancers and laugh in. But that was not necessarily something that was, gonna move me forward, if you will. So I think in the back of my mind, there was always a draw to education. And so that's kind of where I think if I go back to at my core who I thought I think it was always somebody who wanted to participate in making a difference.
Got it. Okay.
If I couldn't be a Soul Train or a American Bandstand dancer.
Well, who's to say they don't make a difference? I mean, look at how much they shaped your formative years. So
That's true.
let's fast forward a bit. So, can you tell us a little bit about your education and career trajectory that has led you to your current role?
This is the question that we get more often, right? So,
Right.
right out of school, so I last century, decades ago. My first degree was in business administration, office systems administration. I worked for a very small software company in Greensboro, North Carolina. Started as the receptionist and moved to the office manager trainer. I think the trainer part is where my passion started into what is now my career. Fast forwarding, that wasn't a great fit. I went back to school, got my teacher certificate. I worked in Greensboro Public Schools as a business education teacher. Our first computer lab came in the like 91, 89,
Mhm.
91 time. And I saw the value of what that technology could do. I started bringing in the English classes and the math classes to work on word processing and spreadsheets, and saw how technology could be an equalizer in many, many cases. So if you couldn't handwrite well and you weren't a good typist, you could work on a word processor. Seeing how using worksheets and spreadsheets could transform someone's ability to understand math and formulas and concepts like that, I became very passionate about what technology could do.
Mhm.
Fast forwarding, I moved through the Guilford County Public School System into more administrative roles. And then I went to Guilford College and was their technology trainer for a couple of years. And then there became a CIO my first time in 2001. And the focus then, as it is today, as I am as a CIO, I believe that our purpose here is about our students and is about the living learning environment and providing scholarship for our faculty and experiences for our students. So my journey is, I would say, maybe not different from a lot of even women in IT, perhaps,
Mhm.
but is different. I didn't come up the tech stack, and in many ways that serves me well because I think of myself more as an educator and a strategic planner. And if I always say, if you want a chief technology officer, then that's a person that's different than me. And so that's a little bit about my journey, about where I am. I could go through the various schools that I've worked at, but that's the high level of where I am.
It's a great overview, and it's also the perfect segue into your current role now. What brought you to NCCU? Can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
what a week in the life of Leah Kraus as CIO there looks like?
Sure. I love telling the story about how I got here. So I'll do that first, which will hopefully shed a little bit more light on the day in the life of Leah. So I left Guilford College and went to UNC Wilmington. I was hired by Dr. Deborah Saunders White, who was the CIO there. And fast forwarding to a few years forward, she left CIO there, moved on to work for the Obama administration, and then became the chancellor here at North Carolina Central University.
How
And
cool.
in 2013. And so I immediately said, "Oh, you're back in higher education." She was my mentor. And I was like, "I will come sweep floors for you." And she said, "Well, I don't think we need to use that skill set, but there may be an opportunity for you." And then I studied about the purpose of North Carolina Central University. Our founder, Dr. James E. Shepard, his the motto here is truth and service. And if you remember a little bit about who I said I was,
Mhm.
truth and service is very much what I identify with. And having an opportunity to one, work under her, a CIO that's a chancellor, hiring me as a CIO was a dream. Any CIO would want to work for a former CIO. And then an opportunity to work for a historically Black college university that has a mission, a purpose, and a community like NCCU does. So that's a bit about what drives me every day. Now, what I do every day and what drives me every day, I try to align, but it doesn't always align. So
That's the
we
struggle, right, for everyone.
it is. It is. So we do flex scheduling. We did flex scheduling pre-COVID, but we've continued it. And my flex schedule employees start at 6. So when I wake up between
Wow.
6 and 6:30, the first thing I do is we're a WebEx collaboration. So I check my WebEx chat to see if anybody was commenting, asking. Then I check my email. Then I start getting ready for work. And then while I sit and drink my cup of coffee and wake up a little bit more, I'm checking email. And um, then I kind of check what my day is going to be like so I know to prepare. I then get into the office because we are here. I'm here 5 days a week
Okay.
unless something happens. So we are on campus, even though we still have flex. I do have employees that still work remotely, but anyway, I'm here. And so during the day, there is a lot of time that I spend on email,
Mhm.
a lot of time in meetings, and the meetings can range from a variety of things. So, meetings where they're project based or planning meetings. So, I find that I'm very interested in growing leaders and making sure that the directors that are here are ready to step into whatever role they want to, that the next
Mhm.
level down. So, I spend a lot of time strategizing with them about
Okay.
how they can better organize their lives, their days, their meetings. And so we do a lot of strategy. And then I do that same thing with colleagues. Either they have a project coming up or they have some opportunities for improvement for my TS. So we spend some time talking about that. So a little bit of meetings about moving things forward, and then a little bit of meetings that I would call more assessment of the
Okay.
organization. Um, at HBCUs, at any moderate to small size institution, as a CIO or any leader, your hands are in everything. So I also spend a bit of time in budget almost every day. It
Okay.
is either budget planning, um, uh, making sure POs are going, working with vendors, checking on contracts, doing that. operational side, and
Yes.
then budget planning piece is a big part of it. And then the other part that I spend a pretty good time in, I talked about this from a meeting perspective, but that's personnel. All of us coming out of COVID, all of us coming out of the Great Resignation are working through hiring.
Oh,
So my
yes.
life today is different from my life pre-COVID. I do spend quite a bit of time, again, in strategy sessions about, we have a vacancy. What is the business need for our organization for that vacancy? We're not just going to hire where we were. We're also using vacancies as an opportunity to promote from inside. So that strategy session. And then finally, if and I get the time, I like to do actual strategic planning for ITS within NCCU and to work on some of my projects. I wouldn't say that's a daily thing. It's a goal for daily, but it probably
Right.
happens 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay, that's a great overview, and especially hearing, I mean, budgets and hiring are such challenges right now, I know. So it's a very accurate assessment of how probably most CIOs are spending a lot of their time. So this brings us to our next question. As you mentioned, coming out of COVID, there's been a lot of need for quick change. There's been also a lot of change fatigue. There's also been augmented challenges. With that all in mind, is there anything in particular, a project or an initiative in progress that you're particularly proud of?
So I'm going to give you three. I hope you don't mind.
No, I love
But
three is
yeah,
great.
thank you. So coming in prior to COVID, we had begun the NCCU strategic plan, and one of those strategic goals for us is to become an R2. So
Okay.
NCCU, we already have 2 research institutes, but and we have a great level of research taking place on our campus, 25 to $30 million of grants. But we're not seen as an R2 yet. There's several things academically we need to do, but also from an IT perspective, this is an opportunity for us to build a better CI or cyber infrastructure.
Hmm.
So we have a partnership with a previous grant with Duke University and MCNC, which is our REN here in North Carolina Research Education Network. So we applied for another grant to do a shared science DMZ and shared compute. Duke University, Davidson College was involved in this one, MCNC and NCCU. So we received that grant from NSF, and we're building out a science DMZ for shared, and we call it North Carolina Share or NC Share, and also shared compute. And so just yesterday, so this is perfect timing, just yesterday, I was able to send to the faculty that wrote letters of support for that grant an email saying, we have something built. We're ready to show it to you. Are you ready to come and work with us on actually using this infrastructure for our students and for your research? And they responded overnight, yes. That's a really, really exciting opportunity for NCCU. And again, part of my love is making sure that our faculty and students are getting what they want. So
Congrats on that. That's
thank
amazing.
you. Yes, very excited. So the continuing with the cyber infrastructure theme, I'm also a member of, NCCU is a member of, and I'm a board member of the Minority Serving Cyber Infrastructure Consortium, which
Okay.
is partnering with Internet 2. And that is kind of what it says it is. It is a minority serving consortium that is focused on IT for research and education, which is CI, cyber infrastructure. And we also, in Internet 2 is the PI, says Anna Hunzinger from Internet 2 is the PI on another NSF grant that's going to allow HBCUs and TCUs and a consortium of other schools to do proof of concepts around building better CI on their campuses. So NCCU was in the grant writing, but we didn't apply because we have this other grant right now, and I
Right.
can't do all of it, but I am very passionate about that work, about the work that is going to take place across our nation to focus again on how we can ensure that all students, no matter what school you're going to, have an experience around research and technology that supports research. So that's the second one. The third one, and you'll hear a theme here around equity, if you will. I'm also a member of a local volunteer group called Digital Durham. And
Okay.
Digital Durham, and I'm a board member of that. And Digital Durham has a focus on bridging the digital divide here in Durham, North Carolina. And we are a collaborative of individuals and other nonprofits and for profits, but with a focus on that. And so those, and we just earned our own nonprofit status, Digital Durham did, and we're in the process of getting some potential grant money to do that work. So it's really interesting coming out of COVID,
Hmm.
um, this opportunity to understand the digital divide and how it's impacted education
For sure.
and beyond. I think is something that I'm proud of the work that this institution does and I do. But it's just very. I think that we're at the beginning of some greatness there.
Those all sound exciting. I think anyone would be proud to be able to claim one of those as something that they've worked on and are moving the needle forward on. So kudos to you on all three.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next question is one of my favorites because it's more on the fun side. And that is regarding this omnipotent genie. So if you could have
Ah,
this genie come down and answer any one question for you about the future of technology in higher education, what would you want to ask them?
oh, so I would ask the genie, have we found a way to ensure that now that we're in, and I've coined this little phrase, high flex living,
Mhm.
not just
I
high
like
flex
that.
learning, but high flex
Netflix
living.
living, yes.
Thank you. So, have we learned how to truly embrace high flex living that also is sustainable and supportive of all the citizens of this great nation and of the world so that everyone has an opportunity for economic equity, health equity, education equity, and of course, digital equity.
I like that question. I think Jeannie might say we have not, but who knows? Maybe there are there are some things out there that we're just not fully harnessing at this point.
It's willpower. I think if we have the willpower to do it.
I mean, it certainly sounds like you do, and NCCU has a lot of people committed to that. So that is very encouraging, I'm sure, for everyone watching this to hear about. Let's close thing out. I'm sorry, let's close things out with our last question, which is, has there been any particularly thoughtful or helpful advice that you've received in terms of how to be in your role, how to accomplish what you need to, and how to persevere, especially given everything that we've all had to pivot around in the last few years?
Wow. So I think you can see over my shoulder on the windowsill.
Okay.
So I mentioned Dr. Deborah Saunders White, who my mentor. She unfortunately passed of cancer in 2016. So she's always over my shoulder, kind of making sure. So she is my mentor in many many ways, and some of the I'll share with you some of the advice that she shared with me that also helps guide me. So when I came here, one of the things she said to me, because as a CIO, you think of all the things you want to do, and most CIOs are change agents. We don't just go in to use the existing technology and keep things status quo. We want to
Yeah.
change things, and then you think about all the things you want to change. So she said, you need some early wins. you need to demonstrate value to the campus pretty early on. And it's okay to change things, but you need to make sure that you pick one thing that the campus really wants and make that happen. So when I came here, we had in 2014, we had some pretty outdated wireless. So that was my first thing. Let's address the wireless. Let's get a win. So something that is has, this is her term, sizzle, right? So
Okay.
yes, you
Yeah.
can rebuild a server room and say, oh, we're going to give you more storage, but that doesn't sizzle. So what is it that's going to provide some sizzle to the everyday life of our students, faculty, and staff? So that's one. And then back to change. So you need to be able to articulate why you're making the change.
Hmm.
Um, did the campus ask for the change? Is the change required because of some compliance, because of some security? You have to address the why, and then you have to answer. We're doing this with you. Hopefully, this is why we're doing this. We'd like to do this with you. Let's plan it together. In higher ed, we like to build collaborative groups. Sometimes things take a little bit of time, but that's because it's very intentional through governance. So why? Then the how are we going to do it? And who is it going to affect? And so that's if you're doing it with folks. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to do things to our campus that they don't necessarily like. Two-factor authentication comes to mind. People don't, we've all gotten used to it, but that is not something that people were clamoring for. But how can you make sure that if you're doing something to the campus, that they understand the why you're doing it, and that you're very clear, and that you can't just say it once and be done with it. So that's one lesson. Another lesson, which I still am working on learning clearly from this, is once somebody agrees and understands, you don't have to keep talking about it.
Right.
So I was sitting across the table from her, and she agreed to something, and I just kept trying to sell her, and she just looked at me and she said, Leah, what are you trying to do? I was like, Chancellor, I'm just explaining to you. She said, I said yes 10 minutes ago.
Right.
Oh, right. So understanding, reading the room, if you will, understanding when you need to speak more. Again, I'm doing it. You're nodding your head. You get it. I don't have to say anymore. So it's the Southern in me. Um, and then the last thing I would say, then this is perseverance related, which I think was a really good question, because people coming out of COVID, we're all struggling with our own challenges of coming out of COVID, whatever that looks like. Our young people, we're just starting to see some of the challenges that they're going through, but it's not just young people. And so I would say, from a perseverance standpoint, we often think of mentors and coaches at the beginning of our career. It's important to have that person throughout your career, whatever
Without a doubt.
stage you're in. A safe space. We talk about psychological safety, but you can't be any more safe than somebody who in many ways is outside your organization, that can tell you, hey, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, or that's a mountain and you need to figure out how to handle it. For me, that has been really helpful and impactful. I can be that person for some people, but I still do need that person myself. And if you're a rising leader or even existing leader, and you don't find that space, then you're carrying it and the weight gets on you and you can't present your best self to your team.
I think that's great advice for people in any career. I mean, I think it calls to mind that phrase, even Michael Jordan had a coach, right?
Right, right, right,
We all need that outside perspective and sounding board there. So a lot of great advice from you here today,
Thank
Leah.
you.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much for taking the time to join us today. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.